Hello everyone, this course is on Python basics. What we're going to cover here is, what is Python, where is it used, and how do we declare variables in Python, what are the data types in Python, then we're going to look from there, we're going to proceed on to actually seeing how conditionals are used in Python. For example, we have to take decisions. So basically how if and else statements work in Python. How do loops work? We're going to look at two types of loops, while loops and for loops. And then we will see functions and class design and also a bit of inheritance. Along the way, I might give you, there will be some project work that would be good if you do, so that you can understand that what you're learning can be put to use in real life. And I think it's my personal opinion that when you actually make something, when you try to make and build something meaningful and useful, you try to find a place for the skills that you acquired. All right. So going ahead and diving into the contents of this course now, the IDE first of all that I am using over here, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. This IDE is called PyCharm Community Edition. It is available for free. You can download it. The company that manufactures this is called JetBrains. They have also other fantastic products like IntelliJ IDEA and Android Studio, which are fantastic, and they're actually free. Okay, so again, you can use any sort of IDE or any environment that you wish. It's perfectly fine. I'll go ahead and actually just create a new file over here now. The first video is going to be about variables. How do we declare variables and how do we find out types of variables and related information about that. So let me just go ahead and give it the name variables. Again, it's really up to you whether you want to start this file with a capital name or a small with a capital letter or a small letter. Personally, I just prefer Python files to start with a small letter, but it's okay, it's just a convention. All right, so fine guys, let's first of all see what are data types. So if we have to declare a variable and give it some value, let's say we want to declare the variable x and provided the value of let's say 2. So all we are going to do is say x is equal to 2. All right, and this has we have done this. We have basically just created a simple variable, and now we can print out the value of x. All right, this is more or less like a hello world program wherein you just try to output something on the console. Usually it's just a string like hello world, but over here we have just created a variable called x, and then we are trying to print x out. So in this IDE, for those of you who are using PyCharm, you will have to click on run, and then you will have to go to run over here. You have to choose the configuration. It will come as usually the file name that you have, and you can see that we get a perfect output of 2 over here. All right, there will be no surprises if, for example, instead of 2 I make it 21, and now if we run this, we should basically be expecting 21 over here. All right, so x is basically an integer and whose value is equal to 21. X could also have been a string. So strings are those data types wherein you can have something like a text. For example, how we usually think of words. For example, let's say x was the string called Python. All right, so if we print out x, we are going to get Python. So this brings us to how many data types are there. Well, the ones that we are going to use mostly, there are usually some 4 or 5. So I'll just list the more useful ones. So x, for example, is a string over there. Let's just have one more variable called y, and it can be 12. So this will come out to be an integer. Let's have one more variable called z or z, whatever you want to call it. This can be 3.2. So see that z is actually not an integer. It's called a float because it has a floating point number behind it. All right. So these are some of the common ones, and obviously one of the other that is very commonly used is this Boolean. So for those of you who are familiar with Boolean, you already know this. For those who are not, Booleans are those that can have just two values, a true or false, and they are not capable of holding anything else. So over here, if we just go ahead, and you can actually print out multiple variables in the same line just by separating them by a comma. So you can go ahead and print x, y, z, a, and we will get all of our values. We do get Python 12 3.2 and true. All right, so this is working as expected. One thing that I would like to show you guys is how to find out the data type of a particular variable. All right, how to basically print it out, because Python is a language which is considered as dynamically typed, which means that when we say y is equal to 12, y, we Python actually figures out that y is actually an integer, although we did not manually specify it. Now in some languages which are statically typed, or those are called well, those are more strict languages. For example, a language like Java, you would have to do int x is equal to 12 or something like that. In Python, it is perfectly fine to actually reassign the type of a variable. All right. So first, let's see what is the type of a particular variable. To get that information, what you have to do is use the inbuilt function called type, which is going to return to you the type that a particular variable belongs to, the data type, whether it is an integer or is it a string, or a boolean or a float. For example, if I just print out the type of x, you can see that x is the string Python, so the data type should come out to be a string. It's not important what is inside of those double quotes or single quotes. Yeah, you can also actually have, you can also wrap this inside of a single quote. That's also working perfectly fine. We will get now the class str, that is short for string. That is how Python identifies a string object. All right, so you can have anything inside of these quotations over here and the answer is not going to change, because we are not actually printing out what x is, we are printing out what is the data type that x belongs to. So is x a string, is it an integer? All right, so let's just go ahead and print out the data type of all the variables that we have over here. In all of in PyCharm, you can actually use this. It's a neat shortcut. You just do Command D for Mac users. For Windows users, I think it is Control D. Again, I'm using a Mac, so I think you could just go ahead and try it out on Windows. Probably it's Control D. On Mac, it is definitely Command D. So yeah, let's just go ahead and print out X, Y, Z, and A. All right, so what we should get, look, this is a good exercise as we go along, to be able to predict the answer, to be able to predict the result of running a program before actually running it. That actually will help you deeply understand the way Python functions. And it's not just about Python, it's about actually any programming language. You should actually be compiling it in your own head first, compiling, interpreting, whatever. You should be doing that in your head first. All right. So let's go ahead and see. Okay, x is a string, so line number 6 should print out a string. Line number 7 should print out, well, y is an integer, so integer. Z is it's a float. Well, basically a decimal number, those or real numbers. The decimal, the ones that have a non-zero decimal, they are called floats in Python. And a should come out to be true because, well, that's a boolean. All right, let's just go ahead and run this. We get class str, that is string, int, which is int, float for the floating point numbers, and bool is short for boolean. All right, so I think this is perfectly fine now, because, well, look, as we go ahead, we'll be seeing more data types. That we'll see lists, dictionaries, tuples, and of course, when we work with classes, we will basically be creating our own data types. For example, you might be creating a book object. So in that case, the data type will actually be a book. All right, but that's actually scheduled for the later videos. I think this should be understandable. I'll just comment it out for now. Again, commenting is usually done so that you don't have to actually this won't run and the interpreter will actually ignore these lines. It is a very useful construct. In Python, how you comment it is just by adding a hash symbol in front of the in front of the line that you want to comment. So that is one way of doing it. As we go along, I'll also tell you the other ways. For example, if you do a triple quote, then this is basically a multi-line comment. So well, you can write anything inside of here and Python would not care at all. You can see that this is coming across two lines, line number 12 and 13. If I run this, there is no error thrown, all right, which means that this is definitely not a Python code, but this is just a comment. It's just plain text written in between a Python file. This is usually meant to, provide some information to the developer or used for documentation. There are many uses for it. All right. So the last thing for this particular video is going to be how to take an input from the user. All right. Well, let's just ask the user for a name. So the way you ask for an input is just as simple as using this function called input, and then you can provide a message to be shown on the console. For example, here we want to ask, what is your name? So we can just say, and ask, let's just say, what's your name? All right. uh, cool. So be careful if you're using a single quote over here, then you will have to actually do a sort of an escape sequence over here on this apostrophe, because otherwise Python would think that your string ended at just what, and all of this part is later. So I'm not going to escape sequence now. For those of you who are using single quotes, you will have to actually do an escape sequence over there, or look at some other sort of a fix for this. This backslash n is one of the escape sequences or escape characters. What this does is it takes the cursor to the next line. All right. So let's just go ahead and actually first run this. All right. What's going to happen is it says what's your name. You can see that by default the cursor is blinking in the next line. This is because of the backslash n operator. All right. So I'll just go ahead and put my name Satyarth. And all right, fine. I mean, there is no error. Obviously, it's not a very meaningful application, because the program asked me for my name, and then it didn't even say a thank you. It did nothing. So let's just go ahead and greet this person. All right. So we can just say print, and I would just like to say hey, plus this is actually concatenation. When we add two strings, all right, so we want to join this hard-coded string hey and this variable that we would get as name. For example, I'm entering the name as Satyarth, right? So now next line should be printing hey Satyarth, and that is if everything works fine, that's what we should get. So let's just go ahead, Satyarth, and it says hey Satyarth. All right. This is how we actually read input from a user. One small note, when we try to read numerical data, there's usually one step extra that we have to do. For example, let's just go ahead and ask let's say for any number. For example, what is today's date? All right. So I'll just say date, and again it would be basically today is, for example, the I think it's 16th. Yeah, 16th. Yeah, today is 16th June. So I would just like to enter 16. All right. So date would be the input of what's today's date. All right. Yeah. And we would just like to print out. If we just print out date, actually there will be no problem. I'll just go ahead and actually comment this function out. All right. So if you're using PyCharm, then there is actually a neater way to comment out multiple lines. You can just do a command and slash, and that will actually comment out all the lines that you had selected. Command and slash is for Mac. I think for all of the Windows-based users, it's control slash if I'm not wrong. All right, so let's just go ahead and run this. It says what's today's date, and yeah, I think this backslash should have been put after the question mark. Otherwise, you can see it's kind of not looking very good. So I'll just go ahead and quickly fix that. Put a backslash n over there instead, and then just reload it. It says what's today's date. I'm going to say 16. All right, it just printed out 16. Well, I say okay, fine. What's the big deal? Let me say I don't want to print show today's date. I'll probably just show what will be the date next day. All right. So all I want to do is I don't want to show 16, but actually I want to show 17. Something like saying that hey, tomorrow would be 17. So you'd expect to do something like date plus 1. because hey, date would be 16 and 16 plus 1 would give us 17. So let's just run this. It asks what's today's date. I enter 16 again, and now I get an error. All right. So one thing to actually take note and understand right at the start itself is that errors are not a bad thing. You will run into errors multiple times. All right. The important thing is that you should be able to understand why the error is occurring. Most of the integrated development environments will tell you where the error occurs. For example, here it is told that it occurs in line number 20. So I see, okay, line number 20 is printing date plus 1. Now there's nothing wrong with the syntax of printing, so probably there should be something wrong with the adding date plus 1, right? Let's go ahead and see what is the extra information given. It says can only concatenate str to str, which basically means that we are trying to concatenate variables. Concatenate is like adding variables that are of different data types. So date over here is a string, whereas 1 is an integer, right? So what we would like to do is actually there are many ways to fix this. Let's convert the date to an actual integer because it's meant to be an integer. So one way to do that is actually you got date, right? So then you could just say date is equal to int of date. What this line does, line number 20th now, is it basically converts date from a string object to a int object. If you want, you can go ahead and print the type of date over here and then print the type of date after you have converted. So if you print type of date in this line number 20, you will get str, whereas if you do print type of date in line number 22, you're going to get int because the data type has been changed. So date is now no longer a string, it's actually an integer. So if we go ahead and run this now, we should not get any error and we get 17. It works fine. All right. Now, my personal preference is actually just combining the int and input right in one go. And, we read whatever we read from the keyboard, that comes as a string. So that is this much part. All right. And then we convert that to an integer. So the highlighted part currently would refer to the string 16, not the integer 16. But then this int function that actually wraps it is going to convert that 16 to actually this integer 16. All right. So let's just go ahead and run this and we will get the exact same output. All right. So I hope this part is clear and this concludes, this particular video. In next video, we are going to see operators, which are the different types of operators that are available in Python and how we can go ahead and, make use of them. All right. So thank you.